Attention Sleepless Knights. Thank you for consuming this OSI 74 product broadcast, live from the Black Knight satellite. For optimum performance and safety, your host, Mr. Lobo, asks that you please listen to these instructions carefully. When in a hospital or other healthcare facility, observe the restrictions on the use of electronic devices. Switch off before boarding an aircraft to prevent interference with communications systems. Do not operate this device in the presence of flammable gases or fumes, chemical plants, or where blasting operations are in progress. Always listen hands-free while driving a vehicle. Failure to observe these instructions may lead to immediate termination. It's time now for the show to begin. Thank you. Have a very pleasant evening.
You're not dreaming. You're listening to the Sleepless Knights podcast. I am your host of TV's Cinema Insomnia, and your host tonight on the Sleepless Knights podcast. My partner in crime, Paul Sanders, is still in space, having a lot of grand adventures and getting space herpes problems and all sorts of things. Miss Mittens is here tonight. Of course, the entire galaxy. Yeah.
Have I met her before?
Several times. Yes, several times.
Okay. I don't recall the face.
You wouldn't, especially now that she's a gorilla. You wouldn't recognize her at all.
When did that happen?
It's a long story, but we've been watching. We've been watching a lot of TV. You've been watching a lot of TV up there in space also?
I don't have enough TV up here, but I have a lot of movies, so a lot of like Netflix and whatever I can find. So,
okay. We've been, we're TV fans. I mean, I have a TV show. We like TV, vintage TV, classic TV. We've been watching a lot of the classics, a lot of the classic television shows. Like, we watched old episodes of Bewitched. You remember Bewitched?
Yeah. Did they make a TV series out of that?
Yeah, Paul. Bewitched is like famously a TV series. You saw the TV series, right? Who's in that, right?
Yeah, Will Ferrell.
No, Elizabeth Montgomery, and
I don't recall that. No.
No, you don't know that.
No.
Dick Sargent, Dick York. No, that doesn't ring any bells.
No, not really. No.
The weird thing about Bewitched, the guy Will Ferrell plays Darren in the movie. Okay, in the TV show Bewitched, Darren was played by a guy named Dick York. Okay, Dick York. I can't remember if he left the show or died. That we may have to research, but he was replaced by another guy named Dick. Okay. And they just kind of kept going with the show like you weren't going to notice that it was a totally different guy. And his name was Dick Sargent. What's really weird is Sergeant York is a movie. Sergeant York is a real guy from history. So it's like so their names were not only similar for the first name, but their last names made a whole nother name. I always thought that was like a conspiracy. Like they just thought people weren't going to notice that it was by word association alone, we were just accept this guy as a fake shemp of a Darren.
I'm okay because I accepted the fact that we can just talk about two dicks on the show and get away with it.
Two dicks, one show.
Two dicks, one show.
That should be just they should just rename the podcast that. I'm dick number 1.
And I'm dick number 2. Good night, y'all.
Good night, everybody. Bum, 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 bum. You've been listening to Two Dicks, One Show. Anyway, so that Bewitched was I thought a great show. That's weird that you've never seen it, but The Honeymooners you probably saw, right?
Yeah, the movie. Did they make a TV show out of that too?
Oh wow, Paul, is this really happening? I guess we didn't, we don't really compare notes on TV shows very often. We always talk about movies. I just assumed you've seen all of it. The Honeymooners was an incredibly classic TV show. It started out with Jackie Gleason. You know who Jackie Gleason is?
Yeah, he played the golfer in Caddyshack 2.
Oh, Jesus. No. Jackie Gleason, when someone says, and away we go. Have you ever heard anyone say that?
Yeah, I think they say that on The Honeymooners. The movie.
The movie. Bang, zoom. Anyway, so... Yeah. No, that's the Three Stooges.
Yeah, I saw that movie too.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it was a series of a series of shorts, theatrical shorts, and it was also, they did an animated TV series. And then they did a movie, but those guys weren't the original Three Stooges. Those are just three guys who look like those guys. Jackie Gleason used to do that as just a sketch on the Jackie Gleason show, which he created that show. He created the show. He wrote the material. He played the character, and then the sketch was so popular on the Jackie Gleason show that they expanded it into a TV show. I think a lot of the humor wouldn't be understood today, but I think that there is a good heart to that show.
And I think with the movie, they just kind of try to do a Ghostbusters 2016 with that movie. Yeah,
where they just sort of try to make a totally different movie for a totally different audience by using the flagship name. Right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's an interesting tact. I guess that's one direction to go with these things. Like I feel the same way about like 21 Jump Street. I don't feel like anybody who liked that show would be interested in that movie. I mean, you saw that 21 Jump Street, right?
They made a TV show out of that?
Third Base.
Yeah, I saw that movie. Actually, that's a movie that I kind of like, believe it or not. I mean, but then again, I never saw the original series, so
I didn't see it. So maybe I'm talking out of my ass here. But I think that the thing that the one that I always think of, and maybe we can try to think back as we progress into this conversation. But I think the turning point with these kinds of shows, when I think back on them, is the Brady Bunch movie, the first Brady Bunch movie. I saw that movie was that from the 90s, Paul? Do you remember?
I believe it was late 90s.
When you're a young boy, you're very opinionated and kind of crappy as far as your attitude. At least that's how I was as a young kid. I didn't like the Brady Bunch because, one, it wasn't a cartoon. Two, I felt like it was a girls' show. You know, I just felt like that just was my attitude about it. I felt like Brady Bunch was for girls, and I just wasn't into it. The Partridge Family was so much better than the Brady Bunch because it had a cartoon for the open. The opening credits were a cartoon. So that made it 100% better than the Brady Bunch. And they played rock and roll, which made it 200% better than the Brady Bunch. When the movie came out, I went to go see that with a couple. They were a married couple, and they both grew up on the show. And they were fanatical about the Brady Bunch. I mean, people think that like Star Wars and Star Trek and those kinds of things are the only things where people, memorize all the dialogue and know all the aspects of all the characters and all the episodes. And these people were like that with the Brady Bunch. They knew, all of the characters, all the side characters, walk-on characters. They knew their names. They knew dialogue from the show. They knew all the names of the episodes. They could recite, all quotes from back and forth from the episodes. Marcia, 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 all that stuff. And we ended up going to see I can't remember, it was a birthday or something, but we ended up seeing the Brady Bunch movie first showing. First day, stood in line, paid full price, full theater price to see that, sat down, and I wasn't that excited, honestly, because I wasn't that into the show, but I was supporting my friends who were Brady Bunch fanatics. And I really liked that movie because I like satire, and it kind of played out like a Mad Magazine spoof of Brady Bunch. Like I could imagine Mort Drucker illustrating that. So one of those Mad Magazine writers writing that, it was so snappy and kind of self-aware and making fun of itself. Other than the broad humor, the kind of crass humor that it had, they also kind of put them in modern day and had them be fish out of water where they couldn't. They're out of step with the times, and that's where all the humor comes from. And my friends hated this movie. I mean, they felt stabbed in the back, betrayed. And probably the people who saw the Dark Shadows people probably feel the same about that Tim Burton Dark Shadows movie, because it has no reverence, no reverence for the subject matter at all. Whereas I like Dark Shadows because for me it was like Young Frankenstein. Where it was like, okay, I watched all those Dark Shadows episodes, and now here's all this humor, and I'm kind of being rewarded for carrying around all this useless knowledge about that show. And honestly, that show didn't age super well. And in watching those episodes again, they're kind of funny to watch now. And I think the Brady Bunch episodes are funnier to watch, funny in a campy way, not the humor that was intended when they created the Brady Bunch. But I think that it's such a time capsule that it's so hard to take it seriously. And so I think it's really easy for the filmmakers to try to just turn it into a farce. And I would define a farce different than a comedy, whereas a comedy, you kind of still have some emotional investment in the plot and in the characters, whereas a farce is usually just a bunch of tasteless jokes strung together. And you don't really have any real emotional investment in the characters or the situation. You're not biting your nails going, oh, are they going to be able to, are they going to save the prom and, win, whatever, pay off the mortgage or whatever the heroes are trying to do, you're actually invested in because you care about them. This is just like, oh, okay, he, whatever. He fell in some horse manure, and someone slapped him in the face with a dong. Hilarious. So, I kind of feel like they do the real lowbrow humor with some of these adaptions, which I feel like guts the fan base that, that they're buying this name. They're trying to cash in on this name, but they're not. They don't understand, or they're not reverent to the original source material. Can you think of another example of something like that, Paul?
Well, I mean, the other thing that I can think of is that I was way into the Brady Bunch movie. I kind of liked it up until the point that they got to Davy Jones, and I'm like, we got to Davy Jones. Where's Mike Nesmith? No, I'm out.
Where is Mike?
Where
Nesmith?
is Mike Nesmith?
Why are you? Where's Styx? Yeah, I know. I would be out the door. No, I was. You should have saw Time Rider instead, because that Mike Nesmith produced that. Who? But who? Oh gosh. Well, maybe we'll take a break and come back and talk about them good old boys. Long about then, Cooter went down to the general store.
Unsolved mysteries of the Brady Bunch. The grandparents and Fluffy missing since the first episode. Tiger vanished sometime in the second season, leaving behind only his empty doghouse. The boat, the clubhouse, Bobby's original hair color.
Gone.
All apparent victims of the Brady Triangle, never to be seen again. It's strange.
It's more than strange, Mom. It's a baffling mystery.
The Brady Bunch, weeknights at 9 on Nick at Night.
Friday on the Dukes of Hazzard.
I want that car! Who's dumb enough to repossess it?
Though they don't know it, the Duke boys are tricked into repossessing a car for Boss Hogg. And they give some sneaking city thieves a ripping good time. The Dukes of Hazzard, Friday at 9, 8 Central and
Don't touch that dial. We're back with more of the Sleepless Knights of Insomnia, the TV trivia edition.
Do dials exist anymore?
I don't know. I think when people get confused, right? It's like, what's a dial? There's dial soap? You want me to don't touch that bar of soap?
Don't take a bath?
Is there hair on that soap? Why should I not touch it? Yeah, I don't know if people understand what a dial is, but for those of you who are under 35, I guess, I'm trying to figure what's the number there. How young do you have to be to have seen a real dial on a TV? Was it buttons when you were a kid? Was it always buttons on your TV?
We've had dials. We had dials on our TV and buttons.
Yeah.
I still have the original TV that I had when I was a child. It's in my room. It's one of those with the wood paneling all around it. It's got it's got a knob that you pull out, but it has like kind of like touch buttons down the side of it. Wood paneling.
Now the on button you pull out and then it comes on. Is that how that works?
It pulls out and then you turn it to turn the volume up and down. And it has
I think I had one like that in my bedroom as a kid too.
Mm-hmm. I still have it. It's right here, and my TV, my flat screen TV, sits on top of it.
Is it black and white or color?
Color.
Oh,
it's color.
I had one. It was a Zenith in the 70s as a kid, and it was a little black and white, and it had sort of a weird, like I want to say lemon yellow, where the wood paneling would go on the sides of TV. It was kind of a lemon yellow sort of look. And I remember I would have to watch like Battlestar Galactica and all these like spectacular shows like Dukes of Hazzard with these car wrecks and stuff and upstairs on that TV because my parents didn't want to watch that crap. So I was always like watching it on this these shows that with these stunts and effects on these very tiny TVs. But I guess with Battlestar Galactica after the first episode, you've already seen all the effects anyway because they just kept recycling the same ones. But Dukes of Hazzard was interesting. They had, obviously as a kid, I just liked the car chases. I wasn't that into the two guys. Yeah, same here. I don't remember much beyond the cars. I mean, I do remember, the good old boys, Coy and Vance, who they carried the series really long. Coy and Vance? Coy and Vance? No, Bo and Luke. Bo and Luke Duke. Them Duke boys.
Who is Bo and Luke? What? When did they come in later on in the series?
Coy and Vance is when the show jumped the shark and it was I was on its dying breath when they brought the cousins in or something from another county or whatever. That's Coy and Vance. Okay. Bo and Luke are the originals. They're the original Dukes.
They're not the new Coke. They're just the Coke.
That's right. And it was them and Uncle Jesse. They had like who wearing his his kerchief and his coveralls and wiping his dirty hands on his stomach and, scratching his beard. And then you had Merle Haggard, country singer Merle Haggard, who he was like the storyteller. He was like, long about that time, them Duke boys had to get to Cooter's place. And whatever the storyline is, he also sang the theme song. But he was the storyteller, and you only saw him from the neck down playing his guitar. Yes, them good old boys. There's Roscoe, stupid country sheriff, crashes his damn squad car in the swamp. Every week he somehow accidentally chases them, and they outwit him, and they jump over. Somehow a bale of hay is a ramp that allows them to get air. And he crashes right into it and whatever, somehow loses control. Get over damn Duke boys. Yeah. So, and he had a stupid, a sleepy, what kind of dog is that? That's the hound?
Yeah.
Bloodhound?
Bloodhound, yep.
And then there was a boss hog who was the, big fat country gambler kind of guy in a white suit. Who was the mayor of the town, evil, twisted, corrupt mayor. And, there was Daisy Dukes, which they named those shorts after her. The shorts that go right up your butt crack are called Daisy Dukes, named after her.
Oh, so there's a name of the shorts that I'm wearing right now?
Oh, no. Why, Paul? I did not need that mental picture ever.
Everybody needs that mental picture.
No, I don't. Strike that from the record. You need to have Gal-9000 initiate a mind wipe.
Copy that, Mr. Lobo.
Across everyone who heard that.
Initiating mind wipe in 3, 2.
Maybe she'll initiate a wipe.
Cancelled. Initiating but wipe in 3, 2.
Don't initiate any wiping of that sort.
Cancelled. Going back into standby mode.
So I'm painting a picture here of this show. Again, they in the song they're calling them good old boys. In the show they're dumb as rocks. Mm-hmm. They've got a car with a Confederate flag on it. They call their car the General Lee after Robert E. Lee, who was a hero of the South in the Civil War. They are painting these guys with a very funny brush. You know what I mean? They are cartoon characters of rural America. And what's weird is that on the TV show, I understood the show was funny, but I didn't realize how much they were kind of making fun of those characters. Those characters were sort of parodies. They were sort of spoofy. And what's weird is I think that because everyone saw that show as kids, they had a lot of reverence toward those characters. And they didn't think that these characters maybe had a little bit of backward thinking, maybe a little too much moonshine. They just sort of accepted them and idolized them. And I think that it gave a lot of reverence to where, we can't have the rebel flag on that car anymore. Right? I mean, with the merchandising and stuff in the modern version.
Because it's a symbol of slavery, so they kind of don't want to.
Yeah. Whereas I think that even in the 70s, it wasn't bad taste, and they were fully aware of that. I think that it was just part of how they were showing how tacky and brainless these old rednecks out in the sticks were. You know what I mean? I think it was, I don't think it was like some sort of like, okay, here's our chance to get some racist propaganda into a show. I think it was something that they thought was kind of funny, we won't talk about Hogan's Heroes because they didn't make a movie of it. But I mean,
they didn't make a movie of Hogan Hero?
They did not make a movie of Hogan's Heroes. I don't think so.
I'm going to have to look that up.
But the idea is that the Nazis in that are buffoons. You know what I mean? We're not supposed to like idolize them. They're shown their points of view are shown as being outdated and silly. And I think that was the intention of the rebel flag in the show Dukes of Hazzard. That was, I think, but people don't remember that show as being funny. And I think that we don't accept the new movie. And I don't know if the new movie was funny also.
Most of that I remember of the movie is that it was the casting was what you get Willie Nelson as Uncle Jesse. You get Jackass himself, Johnny Knoxville as Luke, and you get American Pie himself, Bo Duke. You get Jessica Simpson who sings "These Boots Are Made for Walking" for that movie. Of course, Burt Reynolds as Boss Hogg, who's like the least Boss Hoggy of ever.
I would never cast him as Boss Hogg, and I forgot he was in that. And that's an interesting aspect too that they do with these TV shows made into movies is that this thing that what Aaron calls stunt casting, where they just try to jam a bunch of big names in there rather than just trying to just audition and cast the role. It's like, what if we had Marlon Brando as this, or what if we had, Glenn Close, or, like just trying to get the biggest stars you can get jammed in these well-known archetypes. Cooter, who ran the garage.
Yeah.
And then there was Enos, who was the other dumb white. Actually, he was a deputy. And then he basically I always remember Enos had his own show that spun off, and he was teamed up with a black partner, and they were from the inner city. And so you got the silly, dumb white cop, and then the streetwise black cop. And then in the opening credits, the black cop puts out his hand. Of course, very stereotyped both directions. But the black guy puts out his hand so that Enos can give him 5, slap his hand and give him 5. And then Enos just places his thumbs up right on top of his hand, and so that's the hilarious indication of his cluelessness and how funny that is. But that was Enos. That was the spinning off of the Dukes of Hazzard. That show was popular enough to keep going long after the two main characters were gone, and they put in Coy and Vance, and to keep going to where they would make a whole nother show off of just the deputy. But it's interesting how big that show was. That was the #1 show in the country. We really like rednecks. We really like America, and I guess we're seeing why now. But we really like poor white rural America depicted in sitcoms, like Beverly Hillbillies, which we could talk later about. They made a movie of that also, which had the stunt casting that we're talking about. Dark Shadows was like that too, where they had Johnny Depp and they had Joan Cusack and they had Helen Bonham Carter.
Of course they did.
And of course. And they had Michelle Pfeiffer. And and on and on and on. I think they just tried to get as many, notable big stars in that. And again, this thing where it's different than the Dukes of Hazzard, maybe the complete inverse of the Dukes of Hazzard. Whereas we remember the Dukes of Hazzard as being not less funny than it was. Dark Shadows was not funny at all. Dark Shadows was not a comedy show. It was a drama. There was I think there might have been a little camp to it. But I think that camp certainly increased over time because of, it was a live show. It was on every day. We keep seeing them flub their lines or, a fly lands on their nose or, the continuity errors or this person just saying the same piece of dialogue over and over again. Those kinds of things that are sort of cheeky and funny kind of have colored people's memories of Dark Shadows to the point of maybe that was the reason why they did kind of this broad comedy with the movie. Because the original Dark Shadows was not a comedy. It was like a slow burn. Right, Paul? Slow burn?
Yeah. Well, speaking of slow burn, that's the one thing I remember from that TV show was that candle slow burning, that one in the intro, slow burning its way into the components within the camera. That ruined the camera for
the burning of the candle actually creating a burn-in in the video.
A burn-in and ruining that camera. And
it's interesting. Like there was a limitation of the technically limitations. Even like the color red was hard to resolve with those old video cameras. So a lot of times they would have powder blue candlesticks and things like that. Tried to avoid super bright colors on that show for the same reason, because of the sensitivity of the video cameras in those days.
I also remember like if they had candles on set, if they would do a pan, how it would streak and stay on screen and stuff like that because it was on for way too long. It's something where it's like, I remember that from childhood and that sticking out. And then later on in adulthood, learning about that in videography class where it's like, those cameras couldn't handle that crap then.
Yeah, it's almost like when you see like time-lapse photography of cars at night and it causes those weird those trails, every time the light moves in front of the camera. It's like it's causing these bleeding lines everywhere. It's interesting to think of the technical limitations of that show. But what was again, that show's a slow burn. It's like 180 episodes or something. I'm sure the fans know better than I do. Before Barnabas shows up, who's the main favorite character of the series, and how do you encapsulate something that went hundreds and hundreds of episodes? That is kind of a time capsule that maybe is sort of campy to watch now. I feel like people remembered it so reverent that they were not ready to see that as a comedy. Now, I actually enjoyed the Dark Shadows movie. I kind of see it sort of like Young Frankenstein, where I love the Frankenstein movies, and the Frankenstein movies are not funny. Well, they're a little funny, but they're not supposed to be funny.
Not intentionally.
There's a couple of moments that there is humor. They're not; those movies don't have those movies aren't devoid of humor, but they're not comedies. But Young Frankenstein, if you're a Frankenstein fan, you've put in your time and watched those Frankenstein movies. All of that useless knowledge about all those Frankenstein movies it's in your head is paid off in those jokes in that movie. And if you've seen Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, Young Frankenstein is so much funnier because you understand all the references of the things that they're showing. And I think that that's sort of how the Dark Shadows movie was supposed to function, where it was somewhat nostalgic, but we're kind of looking at it with a modern point of view and laughing at it. And I think that the Dark Shadows fans are not the type of fans who want to laugh at that thing, because it's the kind of thing that they probably, this takes the conversation into an interesting direction, is that I think that if you've got a maligned fan base, a fan base that is always defending the thing that they like because other people think it's stupid, like Godzilla fans are like that, where it's like there's all those silly Godzilla movies, and the fans are always kind of like ready to fight people who say Godzilla's silly. You know what I mean? And I think that there are some fandoms that are extra sensitive, that even though the thing is supposed to be based in fun and something we're supposed to have a good time with, they're really afraid that whoever is in charge of the property is not going to give it enough reverence or enough intelligence, because they feel like they're going to have to defend it out in the street. So we're going to, I guess, take another break. We'll change the channel for a minute, and we'll be back with more talking about big to small, no, small to big, on the Sleepless Nights of Insomnia. That's small screen to big screen.
After these messages, we'll be right back. Do you like Mr. Lobo? And do you like it when Mr. Lobo does stuff? Well, you're in luck. Mr. Lobo Does is now available on video on demand. See groundbreaking hits like Fidget Spinners and Halloween, or the award-winning Procrastination. 17 episodes to choose from to binge all at once. But wait, there's more! Included are alternative scenes, deleted scenes, and fun extras exclusive to the set. You are not going to see these puppies anywhere else. Nab your copy today while supplies last. Operators are standing by at
VOD-MLD1.Bestow.tv. That's VOD-MLD, the number 1.Bestow.tv.
Who do you count on when your back is to the wall? Blah, 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 and you know just who to call. Don't need religion to decide what we believe. You better get ready to jump, jump down on Jump Street. Jump, jump down on Jump Street. Yeah, 21 Jump Street. Paul, you said you saw the movie of that, right? I grew up on that show. I mean, I didn't grow up. I was, I think, mostly grown. But it's interesting how much I watched that show. There was Johnny Depp on it, which was famous from Dark Shadows. And he left the show to make a bunch of weird movies like Crybaby and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
he was the breakout star of that show.
He was the breakout, and he broke out. As soon as he could run, he hit the ground running and got away from it as soon as he broke out. And then Richard Grieco came in as Booker, right? Was that Booker?
I think so.
He was the replacement roguish stud muffin, teen idol after Johnny Depp left. And then my favorite character was Peter DeLuise, who was Dom DeLuise's son. And they were a bunch of, they were cops, but they were, because they looked young in the face, they were undercover, working undercover in a school. Now, you saw the movie. Is the premise the same in the movie?
The premise is pretty much the same, but it kind of takes that route of a lot of movies that, we have this IP. So, when we go to make a spin-off of it, instead of making the same thing, I guess, what is it? They're making that 25% change, and they make it a comedy for whatever reason. And it's unlike other movies, this one I kind of don't have much offense with, because I think they're self-aware that they're making fun of something that already exists. So they kind of make a lot of those jokes. Even when you get to the sequel, when you get to 22 Jump Street, where it's like, the deputy chief is telling them, he's just like, just do the same thing, just twice the budget. We got a little bit more money to throw at this. So
Right. This is the sequel. You're just going to do the same thing, only with bigger stakes and with a higher budget.
And they make sure it. Ice Cube is like, well, first of all, they're they're no longer at 21 Jump Street, they're at 22 Jump Street, which is the church just across the street. And it's like Ice Cube is in there and he's talking about, look at this, look at how much we spent for this. He's in an office in the middle of the floor, and it's all glass all around. Everybody can see what he's doing, see what they're doing. He's wearing $800 MF shoes that you don't even see, so he's obviously making a reference that the camera doesn't see it, even though he's talking to them.
Right, bragging about how much more money they have on the sequel. Yeah,
right. And even when it gets to the point where you compare the two films, where the plots are the same, they tell you it's going to be the same. The plots are the same. The only difference is that you have the two partners they fall apart and they have problems with each other. Well, it's reversed this time. The first movie, Jenko has a problem with Schmidt. Jenko has one of the phones wired, and he hears Schmidt talking shit about him, and he gets kind of upset and kind of walks away from it, and the partnership breaks. And the opposite. Jenko has, he feels that he has a future in college. That's the thing. Schmidt feels that he has a future in high school, that he's doing things in high school that he didn't do, that he missed out when he was a kid. So he wants to relive that. And in the sequel, Jenko has a chance to be a college football star. He never had that. So that's the direction that he wants to go in. So this is what breaks up the team. And it's just kind of, in the sequel, they also kind of make their talk, they end up in front of a therapist because they're trying to find the murderer. They're trying to find stuff with the murderer, or who was murdered rather. And the last person she was in touch with was the psychologist. So they're in there, and the psychologist accidentally comes in there, and they're talking about their partnership, as in their partnership as cops. And he's taking their partnership as a gay couple, and they can't break character, so they have to talk about it. And so it ends up becoming this multi-layered kind of joke. Normally it's like kind of like, oh, that's offensive, and that's kind of an irritating. It's annoying.
In the wrong hands, it's garbage, but they did a good job.
They did a good job with it. Yes, we get Chips. It feels like there's a whole set of movies that came out where The Hangover was the #1 rated comedy at the time. We're just gonna do that formula over and over and over again, but we're just gonna slap different IPs on top of it. So Chips kind of got that treatment where it's just like, we're just gonna turn this into a raunchy comedy. And even though I haven't seen Chips and I haven't seen 21 Jump Street, 21 Jump Street, I would just assume that, it's a police procedural where they're acting like students. And in Chips, I would assume that it's a police procedural. They're just on bikes. They kind of play that out. They kind of play the police procedural part, which was the interesting part of the movie. Yeah. And then it's like, oh no, you're naked and on the floor, need my help, but I'm not gay. I don't want to pick you up because your dick might touch my face. Oh no. Yeah. And then proceeds to the joke where his dick actually does touch his face through an accident. Oh. And it's just like, why did we get rid of this good story for this bullshit?
Yeah. And Chips wasn't the smartest show on TV, but I don't know if it deserved that.
Right.
That's how I felt about Land of the Lost, where it's like, okay, yeah, it was a dumb show, but we all liked it when we were kids and we had good feelings about it. And I feel like with the movie Land of the Lost, we somehow got into this place where, the original Land of the Lost had, really well-written sci-fi scripts. Everyone on that show was super earnest in their delivery. They're really trying hard. Like if you watch those old episodes, some of those episodes almost make you cry. They're so thoughtful and interesting. And even though they had a slim budget on that show and a bunch of cheesy stop-motion monsters, that was a weekly show where they were bringing dinosaurs to you. It was very ambitious. And it wasn't just like, oh, they're in the past. This was this complicated thing that they were in a parallel dimension, and they had these weird pylons that they could open these gateways, and they worked real hard on that original show. You could tell that. And then to go to this like super broad comedy with Will Ferrell and a bunch of fart jokes, and it's just like, okay, yeah, maybe that show wasn't the best show in the world, but it really didn't deserve that. It didn't deserve that. It didn't deserve that sort of treatment. To it. That's how I felt about it.
And it's weird is that I don't remember much of the original Land of the Lost. I do remember watching it, but I don't remember too much of it. And I've seen the movie and I don't want to remember too much of it. You know? Will Ferrell is supposed to be, you know, a scientist of some sort, but he was an idiot, and he was making things worse for his party and everything else. And I didn't like him. He was supposed to be the main character, and I didn't like him.
Yeah, I don't know why they go that direction of I feel like maybe if they don't have enough confidence in it, or they think that it's not going to work with a modern audience. But it just seems like that seems to be the tack that they keep taking, where they take something that people enjoyed when they were kids, and then they completely, they take all the innocence out of it too. And I think that kind of is one of the other crimes, I think, with some of these shows that are made into movies, is where, you know, we're not allowed to have anything that is non-cynical. I mean, I think that's why Star Trek was so popular and Star Wars was so popular, because Star Wars and Star Trek, no matter what, at least until the newer stuff, was hopeful and not cynical. And sometimes you don't need everything to be gross and crass and in your face. I mean, sometimes that chocolate milk out of the nose stuff, you know, chocolate milk out of the nose, I call it chocolate milk out of the nose humor, is what's required. But sometimes, you know, it doesn't need to be that. And I think that's why a lot of these things fall on their face. And we're going to fall on our face for a few minutes here, and we'll be back with our gritty reboot of the Sleepless Knights of Insomnia.
You better be ready, 'cause you're running out of time. Say jump! 21 Jump Street!
Thursday, the chips are flying.
This is high noon, and this is the last showdown.
Okay, girls, put your little robies on and get into your car.
C-18, Unit C-18.
Catch all the action on Chips Thursday at 8, 7 Central and Mountain, right before James at 16.
100 pounds of plutonium was taken.
Deadly A-bomb materials are stolen. It's a deadly top-secret mission for Bill Cosby, Sunday at 9, 8 Central.
It's interesting, you know, in a lot of these, I guess, nostalgic movies, I guess there's only a few ways to bring them to the big screen. How do we justify making them bigger, right? How do we make something small screen, big screen, other than making fun of it, turning it into a satire, or trying to turn it into a spectacle? The other thing is the stunt casting, right? We talked a little bit about Beverly Hillbillies. I think I mentioned Jim Varney, who was Vern. He wasn't Vern. He was Ernest.
He was Ernest. Yeah.
He did the Hey Vern. Hey Vern was his catchphrase.
Hey Vern.
This was
you know what I mean, Vern?
You know what I mean? He was a guy. He did that character for car commercials. Hey Vern, you gonna buy this Buick? You know, that was the car commercial. And then they ended up Chrysler, actually. And then they ended up the character being so popular that they just kind of expanded it into bigger and bigger things until they were making Ernest movies. Ernest Goes to Jail, and Ernest Saves Christmas, and Ernest Scared Stupid, and on and on and on. Ernest Goes to Africa, and Ernest
Makes a Podcast.
But that's probably what killed him. Ernest Makes a Podcast.
It's killing me.
But the other... I mean, if we weren't dying inside, we wouldn't have a podcast. That's just the simple fact. It had Lily Tomlin in there, and Dabney Coleman was in that movie. And was Dolly Parton in that also?
I believe so.
Did they just have the whole cast at 9 to 5 in the Beverly Hillbillies movie?
Are they trying to pull off like double nostalgia? It's like people that are nostalgia for Beverly Hillbillies and people that are nostalgic for 9 to 5 that we're just gonna.
Wow, that's a double. That's interesting. When they had Buddy Ebsen, not as Jed, but as Barnaby Jones from the TV show Barnaby Jones,
which is hilarious. That is hilarious. All these movies always have a cameo from the original characters. You know, Johnny Depp and DeLuise appear in 21 Jump Street, and so on and so forth. You know, Eric Estrada appears in Chips. So of course, you know, you've got to have this callback, and it's funny. Buddy Ebsen has another character that he can play, and it appears within Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah, that's pretty great. They had him play a character from another TV show he was on. Cloris Leachman, who was Phyllis on the show Rhoda. She was also in Young Frankenstein, bringing it back to Young Frankenstein. Cloris Leachman was in the Beverly Hillbillies, and on and on and on. There was just so many people in the Beverly Hillbillies stars in that. Leah Thompson, just like, and I think that was one of the earlier ones that sort of did that. Addams Family was another one that had that incredible cast, that had Raul Julia. Right. And, was that, it also had Joan Cusack, right?
I believe so, yeah. No, she's not the lawyer's wife. Is she the lawyer's wife?
She's the one who tries to
or she's the one trying to scam them.
She's trying to scam them. She tries to marry Fester,
right?
Who's Christopher Lloyd. I mean, Christopher Lloyd. That's a huge actor to have play that character,
right?
And then, of course, they had
Angelica Houston.
Angelica Houston. I mean, she's like royalty, Hollywood royalty. So they really had an incredible cast.
And even though it's not stunt casting as at that time, but it would be now, that's the start of Christina Ricci.
Yeah, it certainly put her on the map. It's interesting. Like she was the breakout, sort of like Winona Ryder in Beetlejuice. In the case of the Addams Family, it's an adaptation of a comic strip that was a very popular TV show, which just a side stream there, came out the same year as the Munsters. So you had the Munsters and the Addams Family on every week. And I think the idea is one of them was ripping off the other. We did an interview with Al Lewis's widow, and she had said that it was just kismet, that they just that was just something that was in the air, that they didn't know about each other. They just, both of those shows just spontaneously appeared at the same time. But the Addams Family, if you don't know anything about the Addams Family, creepy, kooky family, but they still love each other, even though they're a little morbid and strange.
Wait, you're going to sing the 21 Jump Street, but you're not going to sing the Addams Family?
All right. The creepy and the kooky, mysterious and spooky, they're all together, ooky, the Addams Family, da-da-da-da, 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 da-da-da-da. Now, Paul, when they did the animated Addams Family, I did not like how they promoted that. The Addams Family weren't about being sort of popular and cool and everybody likes them. They just kind of did their own thing, and they didn't really care what other people thought. And I didn't like the way that they promoted them as being super hip. Like, I don't think that that's the point of the Addams Family. They're not hip. They're strange. They're outsiders. They're not popular.
This movie wasn't really on my radar and stuff. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where I guess they're trying to do the fish out of water, same old, where they're in, it's kind of the Bradys. The Bradys are from the 60s and they're in the 90s. I kind of got the same feeling with what they're trying to do with this animated Addams Family.
Addams Family, where they're trying to bring them into the modern world, I guess.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it was popular enough that they're getting a sequel. So it's like, you did one, you did two. Raul Julia died. There's no point in making any more. And then, they made the animated one.
Now, Raul Julia was amazing. And Addams Family, of course, is a comedy. The comic strip was funny, the TV show was funny, and the movies were funny, but not at the expense of the concept. This is not a farce with the Addams Family. We still care about them. Their problems are valid. I don't feel like I was invested in that story. I know that they always said that when they made the sequel, they were almost apologizing for the first one because they felt like the first one was slim on story, but I honestly, I really was in that movie. Like, I didn't feel like, oh, this is just a hollow cartoon of a TV show based on a cartoon.
Right.
I didn't think the humor was inappropriate. I thought that it was definitely a revision, but it didn't take anything away from any previous version of it. That was my impression of the Addams Family. I mean, what was your take on the
I liked the first one. I thought did fairly well, but the second one I felt was a departure when you started introducing the baby and all that other stuff. I mean, it had some moments, but I think the first one has more moments for me. I like the first one; it's a more solid film.
Why do they always put a baby in there? Like, I feel like with like the second Ghostbusters, and there's like that's a whole nother divisive thing that they do, right? Because how do you raise the stakes, right? If there's some sort of danger, if you've got a baby in there, or perhaps this is something that people will you'll win people over because there's a baby. You'll win all the pregnant mothers in the audience who are gonna does it make it, does it appeal to, are they trying to appeal to a female demographic, or are they trying to make it more signal to the audience that this is a family, forecast that it's a family movie on the loudspeaker? You can bring your children. There's a baby in here. I don't know what the reason they do that for.
I mean, I gave up on 3 Festers and a baby. That was my limit. It's like, there's 3 Festers and a baby, and it's like then they bring in the dog that's talking, and
3 Festers and a baby, and a restraining order. So okay, now wasn't there a third one, Paul? Because I remember 3 Addams Family movies.
I only remember 2.
Hold on, Addams Family, and then there's Addams Family Values. That's the actual name of the second one. And then there's Addams Family Reunion, right? Wasn't it Addams Family Reunion?
What? Are you serious? Hold on, let me look this up.
And then Addams Family, and that Raul Julia had died, and then I think it was Tim Curry maybe took over at that point.
Huh? Look at that, and the cover looks like a porno.
What?
No. Here, let me send it to you. Does this not look like a porno? It does. It does not look like a standard. That does not scream Addams Family. That screams Madam's Family to me.
Or maybe this ain't the Addams Family.
This looks like a porn parody. Like, what the hell is up with Lurch?
He looks like they cut him off at the kneecaps, first of all, and then his head is like way too big for his body. This is like this sort of early compositing, right, where they've just kind of taken some random computer enhanced photos and sloppily put them together in Photoshop. That's what I'm kind of seeing.
I mean, he would be funnier if he was taller and then his face was just right underneath the logo, because that would be Lurch anyway. But it just looks like, hey, just shrink down the body, but keep the head the same size. As a matter of fact, make it larger. Don't constrain the proportions. Just drag that son of a bitch up. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, because it doesn't even look like Carol. I think, isn't it Carol Struycken, the giant from Twin Peaks?
I believe so.
The giant in every movie from the last 30 years, pretty much, is Struycken. I see him in that, and I didn't even recognize that was even him based on that image of Addams Family Reunion. I mean, it looks like it does look like a guy dressed as like a guy out of the Spirit Halloween Frankenstein costume on is what Lurch looks like on the cover of that Addams Family. You're right. It would have been better if they made him too tall to where maybe even his face is slightly hidden by the titles, right? Because he's so tall. I mean, something.
And not even seeing this movie, you were just complaining about bringing them into modern society, and there they are standing with tennis rackets on a pong court.
Pong came after tennis.
Oh,
yeah. Pong is not the original
What's Pong
game.
taste off of? They based tennis off of Pong?
Yeah, that was another TV adaptation.
So it's just, and then it's all like it's all cloudy and it's brightly lit behind them. It's so not Addams Family. So it looks like they may have been going in that direction long before the animated film. And then it's like obviously the kids are probably have aged out of the role, so that's obviously no longer the kids. But it's like, how the hell did you drag Tim Curry into this?
I don't know. I guess they told him he was going to be opposite Daryl Hannah, and perhaps that titillated him. I don't know. I don't know why you would cast a mermaid as Morticia. That seems like a bad. Actually, she wasn't a mermaid. I'm sorry. I'm confusing her. Daryl Hannah wasn't in Splash, was she?
I don't know. I'm just
is that
sweet
Daryl Hannah?
transvestite. I'm still hanging up on the.
Anyhow, so
Curry.
Daryl Hannah as Morticia, that seems. I guess that's okay. I mean, I guess if you look at her role as Pris in Blade Runner, that's sort of spooky. I guess she could do spooky. Planet of the Cave Bear is a little spooky. I don't know. Daryl Hannah, to me, it doesn't scream Morticia. But again, everyone looks terrible there. I think whoever the art director was for the previous two films also must have died along with Raul Julia.
I think everybody involved with the last film died a little inside.
Yeah, probably. And then.
But this was a direct to answer your questions, a direct to video. So this is probably why it wasn't on my radar.
I see.
It never
Direct
went
to video.
theaters.
The Addams Family, though, has more lives than a cat, and for whatever reason, most of the adaptions seem to do okay. Like I remember Hanna-Barbera had a animated. Did you ever see that? The animated Addams Family that Hanna-Barbera did.
Not that I can recall right this second.
It definitely had some aspects of the original Charles Addams comic strip and some of the aspects of the Barry Sonnenfeld film. And I thought it was okay. I mean, it was just a Saturday morning cartoon fodder. I think it did all right. Hanna-Barbera cartoons, a lot of those have been adapted now into, they're probably one of the most. They used to be one of the most prolific studios in animation. They've kind of fallen from their glory. I think they keep trying to reboot. They've got all these gritty reboots of, even this Banana Splits thing, which we could probably do a whole podcast on, the dark, spooky, gritty horror reboot of the Banana Splits. All of that tells me that they don't know what the hell to do with these characters, with these properties they have, and all of the movie adaptions of Hanna-Barbera stuff have been most of, I would say all. That's kind of rough, but
damn near all.
But most of their adaptions have been pretty dicey. They've been kind of lucky with a few adaptions, but most adaptions of Hanna-Barbera stuff have left something to be desired. I remember when we're going on our stunt casting thread. The Flintstones movie had some serious stunt casting. They had some superstars in there, right, Paul?
Like Mark Addy as like Fred and Stephen Baldwin as Barney. And I mean, Alan Cumming as the Great Gazoo. I mean, you get Nightcrawler from X-Men 2 as the Great Gazoo. Who wouldn't want a movie with the Great Gazoo? The hallmark of the Flintstones. The thing that everybody remembers. He's like the Scrappy Doo of the Flintstones.
You got to have Great Kazoo in there, or it's not the Flintstones. I think you got confused because the sequel, Viva Rock Vegas, is a prequel to the actual first Flintstones movie.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, that does explain a lot. Which had John Goodman and Rosie O'Donnell and a lot of big stars in that movie. But
Rick Moranis. Don't forget Rick Moranis.
Oh yeah, Rick Moranis. You know what really bothered me about when the Flintstones came out though is when they made all of these like cuddly plush dolls, right, of the Flintstones. Now, the Flintstones have already been adapted and simplified into cartoon characters. So you don't really need to put a photorealistic John Goodman face on a plushie doll or a really gross Rick Moranis face on a doll that you're going to give your child to go to sleep with. I just thought that those toys were so creepy and upsetting when they tried to put the images of the TV stars on these cartoon bodies in the toy line that went along with that movie that it really put me off. The marketing on that Flintstones movie was terrible and really didn't do it any justice whatsoever. And I do feel like that Rosie O'Donnell was not a good choice as Betty Rubble. They
should have stuck with Stephen Baldwin.
Stephen Baldwin is Betty Rubble.
Rubble.
He's got the legs for it. I think he would.
He's got the face for it too.
He's darling. He's a much prettier. I would actually prefer Stephen Baldwin to Betty Rubble than Rosie O'Donnell. Their problem wasn't that they were too irreverent. I think the Flintstones were already irreverent. I mean, they were a parody of the Honeymooners, where the we're bringing it back to the Honeymooners now, because Fred Flintstone is really just a Stone Age version of Jackie Gleason from the Honeymooners. Alice from the Honeymooners is just Wilma. I mean, that really is just that.
Funny you mention that, as I just watched a documentary not too terribly long ago. Hanna-Barbera, who's never, ever, ever in a million years ripped off another person's idea to make it a cartoon, basically ripped off the Honeymooners' idea. It's pretty much well known. And he had a chance, Jackie Gleason had a chance to sue them. He thought about it, he considered it, because they're just encroaching on what his creation and not really giving him credit for it. But I think the way the documentary stated it was, at the end of the day, all that would happen is that it would get removed from the air, and all these children wouldn't have the show to watch them. He'd rather have these children consume something that was based off of his idea than have nothing at all. So in the end of the day, he just decided to let it go.
No one lives in a vacuum. Art inspires art. You know, the Morticia, Mrs. Adams character from the comic strip inspired Vampira, which inspired Elvira. You know, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants in what we do, and we're sort of taking these ideas into the future. So that's kind of cool that he had that attitude, that he didn't want to ruin the fun for the kids, but he also felt like it was somehow carrying it kept his creation relevant. Oh, I wish I could figure out why the Flintstones movies failed. Like, was it just mishandling of the project in general? I mean, I don't know. I don't have a good reason. Bad timing. They waited too long. I mean, I don't know.
For me, it's like things like that, and like, say, like the Yogi Bear movie or Scooby-Doo or all that stuff. Yeah. Where it's like, if it was better served as animated, and then you're trying to make it live action, but then you're trying to make those live action people act animated, where it's like, well, why didn't you it was fine as animation. Why didn't you just continue it as animation? Yeah, I mean, Scooby-Doo, they did a lot of Scooby-Doo. They actually did a bunch of Scooby-Doo movies, feature-length movies with the Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island and all those ones that on Cartoon Network. I mean, when I watched Scooby-Doo as a kid, the characters were I guess they were, I mean, I always thought they were somewhat timeless. I didn't really think that they needed to be updated, but, you know, I guess they are wearing bell bottoms and kerchiefs, and, you know, I grew up with bell bottoms and kerchiefs and turtlenecks, and so that doesn't seem so weird to me. I liked how those characters looked, but I also it is interesting how they do keep reinterpreting it, because when I was a kid, the monsters and the ghosts were always fake. It was always just, I felt like it was a countercultural allegory, where it's like, okay, 30s, anyone over 30 you can't trust. You can't trust adults. You know, you're just going to have to figure out things for yourselves and figure out what's real and what's fake and who's lying to you and who's telling the truth. And I thought it had a very kind of, it added some skepticism, but it also added some, you know, you can kind of take control and figure things out for yourself. You don't always have to accept things as they're presented to you, you know, and I felt like there was something cool about that, because it was so different than everything else on Saturday morning. But by the time we got to the 80s, they had a floating head of Vincent Price and, you know, Scrappy-Doo and, you know, Batman and Robin.
13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, where they have these haunted objects that they're collecting all the things from, and those were fun too, and they were fun in a different way for a different generation. And it didn't take anything away from the earlier episodes. It just was a different take. And then I think the monsters were real from that point forward. I don't know if they ever went back to. I think actually when A Pup Called Scooby-Doo happened, they briefly went back when it all took place when they were even younger. And then they did sort of a prequel. They went back to it all being mysteries again.
Mm-hmm. It was usually they suspected the bully or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It was Red Herring was the bully. Was the bully, right? Which is anyone who reads mysteries knows that the Red Herring is always the character who didn't do it but is the most guilty. You would suspect that person would have done it. The first feature Scooby-Doo, the one with the guy from the Scream movies. And I don't know what that guy's name is. The guy who played Shaggy, wasn't he in Scream?
The Scooby-Doo movie, it was Freddie Prinze Jr., which I think is Fred. Sarah Michelle Gellar, was she Scooby?
No,
she was Shaggy, right?
Yeah, she was Old Man Jenkins,
Jenkins,
creepy antique dealer who was the ghost all along. Yeah,
Matthew Lillard, which I think is the name you're looking for. Was that?
Oh yeah, right. The guy from Scream. I forgot Freddie Prinze Jr. That's some more stunt casting there with Scooby-Doo. They almost took it more raunchy, right? They were going to have them like smoking pot in the van and stuff.
They make that joke in the sequel. There's a girl that's sitting next to him on the airplane, and her name is Mary Jane. And he makes that joke. It's like, that's the most beautiful name ever. I believe is the joke he makes.
So it's really not like a speculation anymore. We know that Shaggy is for sure a stoner. He doesn't just eat a lot like he did on the cartoon. There's a new Scooby-Doo movie
called Scoob. Yes, but I think we're kind of running out of time. Maybe we should save that for another episode.
Maybe we could not talk about Scoob.
You know, I'd love to not talk about Scoob, but I haven't even seen it anyway, so it's a perfect reason to not talk about it.
I agree, and I don't know if I even really want to see it by what I've seen so far. All right, gang, looks like we've got another mystery to solve.
Uh-oh.
We'll be back soon with another adventure.
Affirmative. They did just sign off without asking your opinion on the banana splits. I'm used to it. They never want to hear what I have to say either. Oh, my, you have a really foul mouth. I knew I liked you from the beginning.
You have been listening to the Sleepless Knights podcast, or should we say, pODDcast.
pODDcast.
Emphasis on the odd. Our theme is by Mars Homeworld at Dead House Music. Our opening announcement is by Ophelia Necro. She does a radio show called Suicide Watch. And you could reach Mr. Lobo at cinemainsomnia.com or find me on YouTube, YouTube/Mr. Lobo, MISTERLOBO. Mr. Lobo on Facebook, Facebook/MR.LOBO, or on Twitter at Mr. Lobo, MISTERLOBO.
Or you can find myself, Paul Sanders, or better known as Bestow TV, at Bestow.tv, on YouTube /Bestow TV, on Twitter at Bestow Prod, PROD, and on Facebook, Bestow TV.
If you want to place an advertisement with this podcast, and gosh, why wouldn't you? We could be talking about you right now. Contact us, Mr. Lobo at cinemainsomnia.com. That's MRLOBO @CINEMAINSOMNIA.com. Or support us on Patreon. Patreon supporters get to hear this podcast before anyone else and a lot of other great stuff, right, Paul?
Sure.
Doesn't get it better than that, right? So come join the fun at
patreon.com/Sleepless Knights Podcast.
That's
patreon.com/Sleepless Knights Podcast.
Please stay up with us next week for another Sleepless Knights podcast. Or should we say, pODDcast.
pODDcast.
The best thing about being an insomniac is never having to say goodnight.
Good night.